I knew the exact moment the company was doomed. It wasn't when the stock dipped, and it wasn't when they replaced the breakroom coffee with some organic sludge that tasted like distilled disappointment. It was the moment Jared walked in. Jared was the new CTO, a 28-year-old venture capital experiment wrapped in a fitted vest and smelling like sandalwood and unearned confidence. He walked into the conference room like he was Moses parting the Red Sea, except the Red Sea was just a bunch of tired, middle-aged engineers praying for severance packages. I was sitting in the corner, nursing a styrofoam cup of lukewarm bean water, watching him survey the room. I've been here 6 years. In tech years, that makes me a prehistoric fossil. I'm the ghost in the machine. I'm the reason the servers don't catch fire when Black Friday traffic hits. But to Jared, I was just a woman in a hoodie who looked like she needed a nap and a cigarette. By the way, if you enjoy watching arrogant corporate frat boys get absolutely dismantled by the people they underestimate, do me a solid, hit that subscribe button and upvote this story. It fuels my rage and helps me buy more calming herbal tea, which I definitely lace with whiskey. Thanks, you're the best. Listen up, team, Jared started, clapping his hands together like a seal asking for a fish. I've been reviewing the architecture, and honestly, it's a mess. It's legacy garbage. We're pivoting to a microservices-first, AI-driven ecosystem by Q3. He threw a slide up on the projector. It was a bunch of meaningless circles and arrows that looked like a football play drawn by a toddler on Adderall. I squinted at it. He was proposing deleting the central logic gate of our entire logistics platform. That legacy garbage he was talking about, that was quantum ops. That was my baby. That was the code I wrote during the 2020 logistics nightmare, fueled by panic and insomnia, which literally saved this company from bankruptcy when the rest of the world's supply chains were collapsing like a house of cards in a hurricane. Excuse me, I said, my voice raspy. I hadn't spoken in a meeting in 3 months. Heads turned. That garbage handles 90% of our vendor compliance. You delete that node and you're not just pivoting, you're lobotomizing the company. Jared turned to me. He had that smile, the one that doesn't reach the eyes, the one practiced in a mirror while listening to Gary Vaynerchuk podcasts. He looked at my messy bun, my faded Nostromo crew t-shirt, and then checked his Apple Watch. And you are? He asked, feigning ignorance. He knew who I was. It was the line item on the budget that the CFO couldn't explain but refused to cut. I'm Emily, I said, keeping it simple. I built the backbone you're trying to surgically remove. Jared chuckled. It was a wet, condescending sound. Right, Emily, look, sweetheart, I appreciate what you did in the old days, but we're not running a history museum here, we're building the future. And frankly, your monolithic code is holding us hostage. We need agility, we need velocity. You don't need whatever this patchwork is. Sweetheart, the word hung in the air like a fart in an elevator. The other engineers looked down at their laptops, terrified. They knew I wasn't just the architect. They knew I wasn't even technically an employee. But Jared was too busy admiring his own reflection in the glass whiteboard to do his due diligence. See, back in 2018, when this company was nothing but a chaotic startup with 3 lawsuits and a dream, they couldn't afford me. I was a mercenary developer with a rate that made CFOs weep. So, my lawyer, a shark named Heavy Metal Dave who operates out of a strip mall next to a vape shop, came up with a different arrangement. I didn't sign an employment contract. I signed a licensing agreement. I incorporated my own LLC, Ironclad Logic, and I licensed the Quantum Ops platform to them. Think of it like Adobe or Microsoft. You don't buy the software, you buy the right to use it. And like any landlord renting out a penthouse to a bunch of rowdy college kids, I kept a key. Jared didn't know that. Jared saw a middle-aged woman with dark circles under her eyes and assumed I was a legacy hire, some diversity quota from a bygone era. He thought he was firing a rusted cog. Didn't realize he was trying to evict the landlord while still living in the house. Okay, Jared, I said, leaning back in my chair, the plastic creaking under the weight of my exhaustion. You're the boss. Agility, velocity, got it. Glad we're on the same page, he smirked, turning his back to me to point at his nonsense diagram again. We're going to start sunsetting the old modules effective immediately. HR will be doing some restructuring to align with the new vision. Restructuring, corporate speak for firing the people who actually know how the lights work. I didn't argue. I didn't throw my coffee at him, even though the urge was strong enough to make my hand twitch. I just sat there, watching him pontificate about synergies and bandwidth. My heart wasn't even racing. That's the scary part. When you've been in the trenches this long, you don't panic when the rookie pulls the pin on the grenade. You just check your watch and calculate the blast radius. I looked at the date on my phone. My licensing contract renewed automatically every quarter unless contested. The next payment was due in 4 days. Paragraph 4 of my contract was very specific about what happens if the licensee attempts to modify, reverse engineer, or disparage the integrity of the provided software. And Paragraph 6 was the nuclear option. Jared wrapped up the meeting with a "let's crush it" team and stormed out, likely to go drink a kale smoothie and high-five himself in the mirror. I stayed seated for a moment, finishing my cold coffee. One of the junior devs, a kid named Mike who had trained to not delete production databases, looked over at me with wide eyes. Emily, he whispered. Are you okay? He's going to cut you. I crushed the styrofoam cup in my hand and tossed it into the recycling bin with a perfect arc. Don't worry about me, Mike, I said, standing up and smoothing out my hoodie. Just do me a favor. If you see me walking out with a box later this week, don't help me carry it. Just go back to your desk and make sure your resume is up to date. I walked back to my cubicle, well, my leased workspace technically, and logged into my private admin console. Not the company one, the one hosted on a private server in a basement in Estonia that I pay $50 a month for. Jared wanted a revolution, he was about to get a revelation. The freeze-out started subtle, like black mold in a bathroom wall. First, it was the calendar invites. The weekly architecture sync dropped off my Outlook. Then, the strategy alignment meeting. I was sitting in my cubicle, listening to the muffled sounds of laughter coming from the glass-walled conference room 10 feet away. Jared was in there, holding court. Through the glass, I saw him pointing at a whiteboard that I used to own. He was erasing my diagrams, complex, functional flowcharts of data logic, and replacing them with buzzwords like holistic synergy and cloud-native mindset. It's funny how fast you become invisible. 6 years of 80-hour weeks, 6 years of waking up at 3 a.m. to patch a server leak so the CEO could buy his third boat, and suddenly I was a ghost. People I'd had lunch with for years started avoiding eye contact in the hallway. They smelled death on me. In corporate America, getting fired is contagious. If you stand too close to the victim, management might decide you're part of the disease. Then came the new guy. Jared introduced him on Tuesday. Team, meet Tyler. He's our new product evangelist. He's going to be spearheading the transition to the new stack. Tyler looked like he was 12. He was wearing pristine white sneakers that had never touched a dirty server room floor. He came over to my desk, holding a matcha latte, looking like a puppy who just peed on the rug but thinks he's a good boy. Hey, Emily, right? Tyler said, beaming. Jared told me you're the legacy historian. I'd love to pick your brain about the old code before we deprecate it. Historian, deprecate. I swiveled my chair around slowly. Tyler, do you know what a load balancer is? He blinked. Well, yeah, concept-wise. We use AWS for that, right? It's all serverless now. Right, I said, turning back to my screens. Serverless, because the cloud is just magic sky pixie dust, not actual hardware running in a warehouse in Virginia that melts if you don't optimize your queries. Good luck, Tyler. He wandered off, looking confused. I almost felt bad for him. Almost. He was walking into a minefield with a map drawn by a narcissist. By Thursday, my access to the staging environment was revoked. I got a generic system email, permissions updated by admin, J. Doe. I didn't fight it. I didn't storm into Jared's office demanding answers. I simply opened my personal laptop, my trusty, beat-up Lenovo that held the keys to the kingdom, and checked the bank account for Ironclad Logic LLC. It was the first of the month. The quarterly licensing fee for the Quantum Ops Core platform was due at midnight. Usually, the old CFO, a guy named Marcus who actually understood how contracts worked, had it on autopay. But Marcus had been restructured last month, too. I refreshed the page, no pending transaction. I refreshed it again an hour later. Nothing. I sat there, the blue light of the monitor reflecting in my glasses, feeling a strange mix of adrenaline and calm. It was happening. They were ghosting the payment. In their arrogance, they assumed that since I was sitting in a cubicle collecting a salary, which was actually a retainer fee disguised as payroll for tax simplicity on their end, I didn't need to pay the vendor invoice. They thought they owned me. Therefore, they thought they owned the code. I pulled up the contract. I keep a digital copy, but I also have the original, signed in wet ink by the founder, safe in a fireproof box at home. Clause 3.1, Payment Obligations. Failure to remit licensing fees within 24 hours of the due date constitutes a material breach. Clause 3.2, Cure Period. There is no cure period for willful non-payment or unauthorized modification of the source material. Jared had already violated the unauthorized modification clause by trying to patch his new microservices on top of my core without my API keys. And now, he was about to violate the payment clause. I could have walked into his office. I could have warned him. I could have said, hey, Slick, you're about to default on the software that runs your entire inventory system. But then I remembered Sweetheart. I remembered the way he laughed when he said legacy garbage. I remembered the way he looked at me like I was an ugly piece of furniture he couldn't wait to curb, so I let the clock tick. At 4 p.m. on Friday, HR sent me a calendar invite for 4:30 p.m. Subject, quick sync. Location, meeting room B. This was it. Friday firing, the classic move. Do it at the end of the day so the employee can't cause a scene and the rest of the staff has the weekend to forget they existed. I started packing, not much. Just a few photos, my lucky screwdriver set, and a succulent that was clinging to life despite the air quality. I wiped my company-issued laptop. I didn't just delete files, I ran a military-grade scrubber on the drive. Not because I had anything to hide, but because I'm a professional and I don't leave fingerprints. I checked the bank account one last time, still zero. I stood up, put on my jacket, and grabbed the manila folder I'd brought from home. Inside was the contract, heavily highlighted in neon yellow. It was time to go to the principal's office. Meeting room B was a glass fishbowl near the elevators, designed so everyone could see your shame as you got the axe. Jared was there, of course, leaning against the wall with his arms crossed, looking like he was posing for a Forbes 30 under 30 cover. Sitting at the table was Brenda from HR. Brenda was a nice lady who communicated exclusively in sad smiles and pamphlets about Cobra insurance. She looked like she wanted to be anywhere else, possibly dead. "Have a seat, Emily," Brenda said, her voice soft like she was talking to a spooked horse. I sat. I placed my manila folder on the table. Jared eyed it suspiciously, then smirked. He probably thought it was a desperate attempt to show him project charts to save my job. So Jared started, not letting Brenda do her job. "We've been evaluating the team structure. And as we move toward this high-velocity, cloud-native future, we're finding that your skill set doesn't align with the trajectory of quantum ops." "Trajectory," I repeated, nodding slowly. "Like a missile into a mountain?" Jared's jaw tightened. "We're terminating your employment, effective immediately. Brenda has the paperwork, standard severance. 2 weeks' pay, we'll need your badge and laptop." Brenda slid a stack of papers across the table. "We also require you to sign this NDA and non-disparagement agreement to receive the severance," she added, looking at her hands. I didn't touch the papers. I looked at Jared. "Just to be clear," I said, my voice steady, sounding deeper than usual in the small room. "We're terminating our professional relationship. Completely." "That's what fired means, sweetheart," Jared snapped. The mask was slipping. He wanted me out. He wanted my salary budget so he could hire 3 more Tylers. "Okay," I said. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my badge. I slid it across the table. Then I took the company laptop out of my bag and placed it next to the badge. "There. I'm no longer an employee." "Good," Jared said, pushing off the wall. "Security will escort you out." "Wait," I said. I placed my hand on the manila folder. "We're done with the employment part. Now we need to discuss the vendor relationship." Jared frowned. "What are you talking about?" I opened the folder. Inside was the licensing agreement for the Quantum Ops Core platform, signed in 2018, renewed automatically every quarter. I spun it around so they could read it. "I don't work for you, Jared. I never really did. My company, Ironclad Logic, licenses the technology that runs your procurement, your logistics, and your vendor payments. I was just part of the package, on-site support included in the premium tier." Jared laughed. He actually laughed. He picked up the contract, glanced at the cover page, and tossed it back down. This is some old paperwork from the startup days. We own everything you wrote while you were here. Intellectual property assignment. It's standard. We own the code." "Actually," I said, tapping paragraph 4. "Read it. All code, architecture, and algorithms remain the sole property of the licensor, Ironclad Logic. The licensee, Quantum Ops Inc., is granted a non-exclusive, revocable right to use the software, contingent upon timely payment and adherence to usage guidelines." I watched his eyes scan the paragraph. I saw the moment the words hit his retinas, but his brain refused to process them. It was too absurd for him. In his world, developers were cogs, companies owned everything. "This is bullshit," he spat. "You were on payroll, that voids this." "Check with legal," I said. "I was on a retainer. Taxed as a 1099 contractor for the first 2 years, then moved to a W-2 structure for administrative convenience per a specific addendum signed by the founder. But the IP rights, those never transferred. Ironclad Logic still holds the copyright registration." I stood up. "Here's the situation, Jared. You just fired the on-site support. That's fine. I was tired of the coffee anyway, but you also missed the quarterly licensing payment. That's a breach. I'm not paying you a dime," Jared hissed, his face turning a shade of red that clashed with his vest. "Get out before I call the cops." "Okay," I said. I walked to the door. I paused and looked back at Brenda, whose mouth was hanging open. "Brenda, you might want to print out hard copies of the payroll data. Just a friendly tip." I looked at Jared one last time. "Clause 6, Jared. Look it up. Unauthorized use of the software following a breach of contract will result in immediate suspension of service. You have 72 hours to cure the breach. But since you just fired the only person who knows how to keep the engine running, I'd say you have less than that. Get out." Yelled, I walked out. I didn't look back. I walked past my old desk, past Tyler, who was aggressively typing nothing, past the break room. I walked out into the parking lot, the air thick and humid. I lit a cigarette, my first in 6 months, and inhaled deeply. It tasted like freedom. I got in my truck, a beat-up Ford F-150 that I trusted more than any human being, and tossed the manila folder on the passenger seat. Thought they fired an employee. They just evicted their landlord, and they didn't even have a spare key. I drove straight to the liquor store. Not the nice one with the wine-tasting station, but the one with bulletproof glass and a cashier named Sal who doesn't judge when you buy a handle of whiskey at 4:45 p.m. on a Friday. I bought a bottle of Old Crow. It tastes like gasoline and bad decisions, which felt appropriate for the occasion. Back at my apartment, one bedroom that smelled like Nag Champa and soldering iron, I set up my command center. I wasn't going to hack them. I didn't need to. Hacking is illegal. What I was doing was strictly administrative enforcement of a binding contract. I opened my laptop and logged into the Ironclad Logic remote admin panel. It communicated with the Quantum Ops servers via a heartbeat signal. Every hour their server pinged mine, am I still allowed to exist? And for 6 years. My server replied, yes, carry on. I poured a glass of whiskey, no ice. I took a sip and shuddered. It burned the lingering taste of corporate betrayal right out of my throat. On my screen, the status lights were all green. Inventory module active. Vendor API active. Payroll gateway active. I navigated to the license status tab. Current status, grace period. Grace period ends T-minus 48 hours. Jared had called my bluff. He thought the contract was a prop. He thought I was just a bitter old woman waving paper around. He didn't understand that the code I wrote was paranoid. I wrote it that way because I knew people like him existed. The software verified its license against the blockchain. It was immutable. I changed the setting from grace period to strict enforcement. Then I queued up a command, revoke license key 001. I didn't hit enter yet. I wanted to give them the weekend. Let them enjoy their mimosas. Let Jared brag to his brunch friends about how he trimmed the fat at the office. The system was designed to do a hard check at 8 a.m. Monday morning when the transaction volume spiked. I sat back and opened YouTube. I needed a palate cleanser. I put on a compilation of Danny DeVito eating garbage in It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. There's something soothing about watching a man who has fully embraced the chaos of existence. I felt a spiritual kinship with Frank Reynolds. He was the trash man. I was the code woman. We were both misunderstood artists of filth. My phone buzzed. It was Mike, the junior dev. Text, Jared is popping champagne. He says he's going to use your salary to buy a ping pong table. I hate it here. I chuckled and typed back, me. Don't sign any long-term leases, kid. Maybe call in sick on Monday. I spent the weekend doing things I hadn't done in years. I slept in past 6 a.m. I went to a diner and ate eggs that were dripping in grease. I didn't check my email. I didn't answer the frantic automated alerts that started pinging my burner phone around Sunday noon when the system started noticing the license server was unreachable. Sunday night, the whiskey bottle was half empty and my resolve was full. I looked at the clock. Monday, 7:55 a.m. The Quantum Ops offices would be waking up. The warehouse teams in our state and Nevada would be logging in to process the weekend orders. The automated procurement bots would be attempting to order $2 million worth of raw materials. I hovered my mouse over the revoke button. This wasn't revenge. Revenge is emotional. Revenge is keying a car. This was business. This was a landlord changing the locks on a tenant who trashed the place and refused to pay rent. Paragraph 4, bitches, I whispered to the empty room. I hit enter. On the screen, the status lights flickered. Inventory module unlicensed. Vendor API access denied. Payroll gateway critical failure. The cascading red text was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. It was poetry. It was grimecore art. It was the visual representation of mess around and find out. I took a sip of whiskey. It went down smooth this time. The silence on my phone didn't last long. At 8:03 a.m., the first text came in. It wasn't from Jared. It was from the automated pager duty bot, which I had forgotten to unsubscribe from. Alert, Sev1, critical outage. Main database unresponsive. Error code, 402 payment required. Error 402. HTTP status code reserved for future use, but one I had repurposed specifically for this moment. It literally means payment required. I wondered if anyone in that building was smart enough to Google it. At 8:15 a.m., my phone rang. Unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. Then again. I imagined the scene. The warehouse floor in Nevada grinding to a halt because the scanners couldn't authenticate the inventory. Trucks lining up at the loading docks, drivers screaming because the digital manifests were blank. The customer service lines lighting up like a Christmas tree as thousands of orders failed to process. At 8:30 a.m., Mike texted me. Mike, OMG, everything is down, everything. The dashboard just says, please contact administrator. Jared is screaming at the servers. He literally kicked a rack. I smiled, eating a piece of cold toast, kicking the hardware. Universal sign of a man who has no idea how software works. At 9:00 a.m., the phone rang again. This time, the caller ID said Quantum Ops HQ. I picked up. I put it on speaker and set it on the table while I watered my succulent. Hello, I answered, my voice groggy, feigning sleep. Emily, this is Jared. His voice was an octave higher than usual. It sounded tight, like he was being strangled by his own vest. Who? Jared, the CTO. Look, have a situation. The system is down, all of it. We think it's a logic bomb. Did you leave something running? I don't work there anymore, Jared, I said, spraying the plant. I returned my laptop. I have no access. Don't give me that, he shouted. I could hear panic in the background, phones ringing, people yelling, the error message. It says license invalid. What did you do? Oh, I said, acting dawning realization. The license. Yeah, I told you about that on Friday. Did you pay the invoice? The invoice? I told you we're not paying that. It's extortion. It's a contract, Jared. And since you didn't pay and since you fired the on-site admin, the software has reverted to its default state. which is off. Turn it back on, he demanded. Right now, or I will sue you into the ground. I will ruin you. Jared, I said, my voice dropping to that cold, steel tone I used when training interns. We're currently using unauthorized intellectual property. My lawyer is drafting a cease and desist as we speak. If you attempt to bypass the lock, that's a violation of the DMCA. That's a federal crime. Do you look good in orange jumpsuits? It might clash with your vest. There was silence. Then a muffled voice in the background. It sounded like the legal counsel. I heard the words, she's right, and liability. Just fix it, Jared pleaded, his bluster evaporating. We're losing $10,000 a minute. That sounds like a you problem, I said. I'm unemployed. I have a lot of free time, but I don't do charity work for companies that fire me. What do you want? I want you to put the CEO on the phone, I said. He's in a board meeting. Then drag him out. Because in about 10 minutes, the vendor auto-pay system is going to try to wire payments to your suppliers, and since the encryption keys are locked, it's going to fail. Your supply chain will officially be dead by lunch. Hold on, he gasped. I heard the phone fumbling. I heard running footsteps. I took another sip of coffee. I wasn't just twisting the knife. I was showing them the anatomy of the wound. They thought technology was magic. They thought it just happened. They forgot that people built it, people with mortgages and pride and contracts. A new voice came on the line, deep, booming, but currently shaking. It was Richard, the CEO, man who had bought his third boat while I was patching the 2020 holes. Emily, Richard said. What the hell is going on? Morning, Richard, I said pleasantly. I believe your CTO evicted your landlord, and now you're locked out of the house. Richard tried to play the we're a family card immediately. It's the last refuge of a scoundrel with a falling stock price. Emily, look, emotions are high, Richard said, his voice dripping with fake empathy. Jared made a mistake. He's young, he didn't understand the nuances of your arrangement, but we can fix this. Just turn the servers back on, come in, and we'll discuss a raise, a big one. I was sitting on my porch now, feet up on the railing, watching my neighbor, old man Jenkins, wrestle with his lawnmower. He was winning, unlike Richard. I don't want a raise, Richard, I said, and I don't want my job back. That bridge didn't just burn, it evaporated. Then what? What is this blackmail? It's a vendor dispute, I corrected. You are currently in possession of proprietary software that you haven't paid for. Since you terminated the support contract, I am exercising my right to terminate the license. You have two options. I paused. I let the silence stretch until it became uncomfortable. Option A, I continued. You migrate to a new system. Jared seems to think he can build a cloud-native AI ecosystem, or whatever buzzword salad he spit out. Go ahead, build it. It took me 6 years to build Quantum Ops. Maybe he can do it in 6 hours. Good luck. We can't do that, Richard snapped. We're dead in the water without your platform. Option B, I said, you purchase a one-time perpetual license for the source code. Meaning you buy Ironclad Logic's IP. You own it, I walk away. You get the keys, the documentation, everything, you never see me again. Fine, Richard said instantly. Fine, we'll buy it. How much? 50,000. 100, I laughed. It was a dry, raspy sound that startled a squirrel on the lawn. Richard, you're losing 10 grand a minute. You processed $300 million through my code last year. 100 grand buys you a consultancy firm's PowerPoint presentation, not the engine of your company. How much, Emily? 2.6 million, I said. That's insane. Richard roared. That's extortion. That's the valuation, I said calmly. I did the math. It's exactly 1% of the revenue my code saved you during the pandemic. Plus a nuisance fee for having to listen to Jared call me sweetheart. I won't pay it, okay. Good luck with the migration. Oh, and Richard? The Data Vault export protocol initiates in 1 hour. If the license isn't renewed or transferred, the system automatically purges customer data to comply with privacy laws. You know, GDPR and all that. You wouldn't want to keep user data on an unlicensed system. That would be illegal. You rigged it to delete the data? I programmed it to be compliant, I lied. Well, mostly lied. It was a privacy feature, but weaponized. I need time, Richard said, sounding defeated. You have 59 minutes, I said. I'll send the DocuSign to your personal email. I assume corporate email is down since the authentication server runs on? Well, you know, I hung up. I watched old man Jenkins finally get his mower started. It roared to life, spewing blue smoke. Yeah, get it, Jenkins, I muttered, raising my coffee mug. My phone buzzed again. It wasn't Richard. It was a LinkedIn notification. Jared Tech Guru has viewed your profile. I bet he did. I bet he was looking at my skills section, realizing that legacy architecture meant the only thing holding up the ceiling. I went inside and opened my laptop. I drafted the invoice. Ironclad Logic LLC. Service, transfer of IP rights and emergency system restoration. Amount, $2,600,000 and 0 cents. Note, payment required via wire transfer immediately upon signature. I sent it. Then I sat and waited. The power of being the one who built the maze is that you're the only one who knows where the exit is. They were trapped in the dark, and I was selling flashlights for premium. The next 45 minutes were a blur of texts from Mike. He was live blogging the apocalypse from the server room. Mike, 10:15 a.m. Bro, it's bad. Legal is screaming at Jared. They found the contract. The general counsel literally asked Jared if he can read. Mike, 10:22 a.m. Richard is red in the face. He's talking about calling the FBI. Legal told him that since it's a contract dispute and we stopped paying, FBI would just laugh. We literally breached first. Mike, 10:35 a.m., Jared is crying, actual tears. He's blaming the vendor. He said you sabotaged us. Richard threw a stapler at the wall. I watched the clock. 10:45 a.m. 15 minutes until the compliance purge, which was actually just a script that archived the data to cold storage, but they didn't need to know it was recoverable. My phone rang. It was legal. A woman named Sharon. I liked Sharon. She was sharp, but a polite one. Emily, Sharon said. Her voice was flat, professional. The voice of someone cleaning up a toddler's mess. We've reviewed the documentation. Hi, Sharon, did you catch paragraph 4? I did, and paragraph 6. And the addendum regarding IP assignment, it's ironclad. Pun intended. I have a good lawyer, I see that. Look, Richard is ready to sign. We need an assurance that the system comes back online immediately. No delays. The second the wire hits my account, I push a patch that updates the license key to perpetual. The red lights turn green, business as usual. Jared can even keep his job if you haven't thrown him out the window yet. Jared is being handled, Sharon said. Sending the wire now. I refreshed my bank app. It's a strange feeling. Watching your net worth go from enough for rent and tacos to enough to disappear in a single second. Pending transaction. Plus $2,600,000 and 0 cents. Source, Quantum Ops Inc. It's there, I said, my heart skipping a beat for the first time all weekend. Unlock it, Emily. Pleasure doing business with you, Sharon. I hung up. I tabbed over to my terminal. Command, update license status perpetual. Command, cancel purge sequence. I hit. 2 minutes later, Mike texted. Mike, we are green. Systems are booting. The dashboard works. People are cheering. It's like the end of Apollo 13 in here. I didn't cheer. I felt a sudden, crushing exhaustion. The adrenaline dump. It was over. I had won. I had humiliated the tech bro culture that tried to erase me. I had secured my retirement. But I also knew I was done. I could never work in this town again. Word spreads. I was the developer who held a company hostage. They wouldn't tell the story about how they didn't pay me. They'd tell the story about how I was dangerous. I was fine with that. I looked at the bottle of Old Crow. I deserved an upgrade. I went to the kitchen and poured the rest of the cheap whiskey down the sink. I grabbed my keys. I was going to the good liquor store, the one with the cheese samples. But before I left, I sent one last email to Jared. Subject, transition handoff. Body, the keys are under the mat. Try not to burn the house down. P.S. The legacy garbage just cost you $2.6 million. Might want to respect the code next time, sweetheart. 2 weeks later, I was sitting in a waiting room, not the doctor's office, the lobby of Apex Logistics. Apex was Quantum Ops' biggest competitor. They were the Coke to our Pepsi. They were bigger, uglier, and meaner. They had been trying to poach me for years. I was wearing a blazer this time. No hoodie. I looked like a consultant. I looked expensive. The director of engineering at Apex, a guy named Stan who looked like a walrus in a tie, came out to greet me. Emily, Stan boomed, I heard you're a free agent. Rumor has it you burned Quantum Ops to the ground and then sold them the ashes. I just enforced a contract, Stan, I said, shaking his hand. Strictly business. Well, like business, Stan grinned. Come on back. We sat in his office. He got straight to the point. We're struggling with our vendor compliance module. It's slow, it crashes. We heard Quantum Ops has a system that works. Miracle code, they call it. It's not a miracle, I said. It's graph theory and efficient caching. And yes, I built it. Can you build it for us? I smiled. I can't give you the code. I sold them. That's their property now. IP transfer. I respect contracts. Stan looked disappointed. However, I continued, pulling a new folder out of my bag. That code is 6 years old. It's written in Java 8. It's legacy. I saw Stan's eyes light up. In my free time, I lied. It was actually during the endless meetings Jared made me attend. I've been sketching out a new architecture, Rust-based, high concurrency. It wouldn't just match Quantum Ops speed. It would lap them. It would make their system look like an abacus. And how long to build it? 6 months. If you give me a team and total autonomy. No Jareds, no product evangelists, just me and some coders who know what a pointer is. And the price? Consulting fee, I said, plus equity. Stan extended his hand. Welcome to Apex, Emily. I walked out of that building with a contract that made the $2.6 million look like a tip. Here's the thing about winning. It's not about destroying the other guy. It's about making sure that even when they think they've won, Quantum Ops technically own the code now. They're still losing. They paid millions for a Honda Civic. I was about to build a Ferrari for the guys across the street. I stopped by a newsstand on the way home. I checked the trade journals on my phone. Headline, Quantum Ops CTO demoted to special projects following Q3 outage. Jared wasn't fired. Of course he wasn't. He probably had an uncle on the board. But he was banished to the basement. He was now in charge of special projects, which in corporate speak means don't touch anything sharp. I lit a cigarette. The smoke curled up into the gray sky. I felt clean. 6 months later, Apex Logistics launched Apex Prime. It destroyed the market. It was faster, leaner, and didn't crash when you looked at it wrong. Quantum Ops stock dropped 40% in the first quarter. They were stuck with a legacy system that they barely understood. maintained by a team of terrified juniors who were too scared to change a line of code for fear of locking up the bank accounts again. I heard through the grapevine that Jared eventually quit. He pivoted to crypto evangelism. It fits. It's another industry where you can sell hot air and disappear before anyone realizes the balloon is empty. As for me, I'm currently sitting in my newly renovated living room. I replaced the Nag Champa with expensive candles that smell like sandalwood and vengeance. I have a 4K TV dedicated exclusively to Danny DeVito movies. I'm not happy exactly. Happiness is for people who don't know how the sausage is made, but I'm satisfied, I'm balanced. I still have the old manila folder. I framed it. It hangs in my home office, right above my monitor. Paragraph 4. Paragraph that bought this house. Sometimes, late at night, I check the logs of the new system I built for Apex. I see the traffic flowing. I see the commerce of the nation moving through logic gates I designed. I think about the women like me all over the country, the invisible architects, the ones who keep the lights on while the Jareds of the world take credit for the electricity. We're out here, we're watching, and we read the fine print. So, next time some 20-something in a fleece vest calls you sweetheart or dismisses your work as legacy garbage, don't get mad. Don't scream. Just make sure you own the keys. And if you have to burn the house down, make sure you charge them for the matches. This is Emily signing off. I've got a date with a glass of Pinot and a sunny marathon. And seriously, if you learned anything from this corporate war crime, hit that upvote. It costs you nothing, unlike Jared's mistake. Next step, would you like me to write a follow-up post where Emily details the specific malicious compliance tricks she used to train the new team at Apex? Or perhaps a prequel story about the 2020 logistics nightmare that cemented her legend? Big thanks for watching, you sneaky seniors. Subscribe to keep the coffee pot brewing revenge. Your ex-colleagues won't know what hit him.